we're waiting for one of our fathers to come over. My mother takes off upstairs. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rings. All three of us little hopeful children, we go and we answer the door. I still remember this like it was yesterday. It was just so utterly mortifying and soul destroying. Hey everyone, it's Adele. I'm back with a new video for you today. This one is a bit of a scorcher. It's a little bit racy. It's definitely very disturbing. But here on this channel, I am here for you to initiate these authentic conversations, talk about the difficult and unpleasant things in our relationships with our parents, with ourselves, and in our love lives, so that we can all benefit and grow. The shame of these things, it builds in secret. It builds in quiet, it builds behind closed doors of don't air family laundry, and then it just goes on to hit generation after generation of children. So I know my audience is here for it. I have to be honest, like some of this stuff is so outrageous, you just have to laugh. So we're gonna laugh, we're gonna cry, we're gonna share our stories. Go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and we're going to level up and become better and better women every day. And I'm so grateful to have you all here on this journey with me. I have a lot of new subscribers from my last video that I posted about when I realized he hated me, a response to Brainy Lee. Thank you so much for all of your heartfelt comments. I had to turn my phone on airplane mode while I'm filming right now because I keep getting notifications on these wonderful comments coming up. So I really appreciate you all. Thank you all for being new to our family here. It's been a while since I've gained subscribers. I stopped filming a while back, probably about a year ago, and my subscribers went off a cliff. So the ones that are still hanging around are the OG subscribers that are down to ride with me, and we've got each other's backs. So I hope you all play nice, the new subscribers and the old subscribers, because we are so happy to have you join our little family here on the internet. Also, thanks to those of you who noticed my cute hairdo. I did this myself at home. As many of you know, I live out here in the country and pretty isolated. I've been on the same kick that a lot of us have been on, where we're like learning to be more self-sufficient and do things for ourselves at home. I watched a 6-minute YouTube video and chopped off like 7 inches of hair. So now I know how to cut hair, ladies. Yes, that's right, line up. You have to sign a waiver. Oh, and no refunds. I'm actually probably just gonna have to go into the salon and get it fixed up because it's kind of uneven. So what is a pick-me woman? There are many people who could argue this definition. However, all of their definitions are wrong. Why? Because myself, Adelle Ramcharan, I am the official
Pick-me supreme.
Yes, that's right. I was the pick-misha, the pick-maestro of all time. And I have stories for days about the entirely horrific pick-me behavior I've exhibited in my adult dating and relationship life. If you're interested in hearing about those, please click like on this video and I will make that video for you guys, much to my own dismay. So a pick-me or a pick-misha is a woman who is basically out to throw herself and anyone else in the way under the bus in the hopes that she could get any kind of attention or validation from him. A woman who's behaving this way is acting out of female nature, right? Because even if you look at the smallest basics of our biology, the sperm chases the egg, right? The egg doesn't go running chasing after the sperm. So when you have a woman who's throwing herself at a man and trying to convince him of how good she would be for him, there's something off. It goes against nature. And it also indicates that this person has a very low sense of self-esteem and self-worth. Or maybe they were just modeled codependent behavior in childhood, right? Watching the way their mother behaved towards men. And well, that's the story I have for all you today. So I grew up the eldest of 3 children. So I have 2 younger brothers. My mother was a single mom. We all had different dads, my brothers and I. My mother had never been married. I'd say we were all the result of like flings, short-term relationships. We lived in poverty. We were on welfare. And I have to, like, looking back, being on welfare in the 80s in Canada must have been good to some degree, because we lived in a safe, beautiful neighborhood that was across the street from a playground, a park, a swimming pool. Yes, the one that I drowned in when I was 4 years old, that one. There was a planetarium, a science center, a library, elementary school. So growing up being poor, it looked like not having new or fancy things, and having a lot of food at the beginning of the month that slowly petered out, and then by the end of the month it was like random odds and ends in the cupboard for like a few weeks. There are so many pygmy behaviors that I witnessed in my mom from a very young age, and I always knew that they were wrong. Like something just felt off about it to me. I would say probably the first thing that I ever noticed was that I had a friend, and looking back, he was autistic. I didn't know what that was. To me, he was just normal. You know, he would make his little stimming noises like ee. He would rock like this, you know, but he could talk and he could play, and he and I were friends. And to me, I treated him just like a normal kid. His father used to come around and talk and converse with my mother, and we would go on walks together. You know, it would be my friend, his father, me, my brothers, and my mom. And so I think from the outside, it probably looked like a family to some degree. They would, you know, we would go to the park, and then my mom and my friend's dad would go off and sit together and talk and have these intimate, long conversations on and on. So it really wasn't until after a while that I realized that my friend had a mother, and his father had a wife. My mother was well known for going around and deeply befriending men in the neighborhood to get attention from them. I think she was also extracting money from them, favors, and these men would have problems with their wife because of it. I wrote about this in my book. There was one story I wrote about where my mom was friends with this man. He was in the process of getting divorced, and he saw her as this like pretty single mom. You know, he would come and he would bring stuff for us and talk with her for hours. My mother was a very deep, interesting, intense kind of person. So I'm grateful to her for that side of my personality, because I grew up around books on history, Greek mythology, religions, personality and psychology, spirituality. I grew up, you know, I learned to read when I was 2 years old, and I grew up around these books in the house, reading whatever I could get my hands on. So my mother would sit and talk to these guys about these deep topics, you know, being really interested in them personally for hours on end. Meanwhile, their wives would be getting really, really angry. And my mother would talk bad about these men's wives to us and also to them. Like I could hear. She would constantly complain, like, "Why is your wife doesn't like me? She's so insecure," stuff like that. One day, this guy ended up getting a new fiance, this young girl. And I remember she had these like blonde extension braids. He was still talking to my mom, giving her money, and apparently this guy's fiance, she tried to break up this friendship of this guy and my mom, and the guy refused to break up his friendship with my meddling mother. So the fiance settled on, okay, but you have to stop giving her money, and I want to meet her. So we decide to have this man and his fiance over to our house for dinner. There are two things I remember from that night. One was that one of her hair extensions fell out on the floor, and I picked it up. I didn't know that hair extensions were a thing at the time, so I was like really confused. It was embarrassing. And also that there was this really awkward moment where I was in the kitchen. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I looked under the butter dish in the fridge and there was $50. So I ran out into the living room where these adults were sitting there conversing awkwardly, and I said, "Look what I found in the butter dish." Dead silence. This man's fiance just gave him the most dirty look, picked herself and her little extension up, and walked out the door. So my mother had, her boyfriends, our fathers would come by and visit, obviously not for very long. I remember she used to try to get us all hyped up, like, one of your fathers is coming for a visit. And we're like, oh, one of us is going to have a father today. And I remember it was such an awkward feeling because it was like, I know for me, I can't speak for my brothers, but I could kind of sense what was going on. Like for me, I wanted to be excited if it was my dad, but like I didn't want to be too excited because I felt bad for my brothers that it was like, it's my dad and not any of yours. It's really horrible position for children to be in, honestly. So yeah, we get really excited that one of our dads was coming over. So that's how she got us to clean up the entire house, because we lived in filth for the most part. And my mother would chain smoke cigarettes all day long. So, the house smelled. It was basically like the place you imagine a serial killer would be born and bred in. So picture this. I still remember this like it was yesterday. It was just so utterly mortifying and soul destroying. So we've got the house all clean. We're waiting for one of our fathers to come over. My mother takes off upstairs. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rings. All three of us little hopeful children, we go and we answer the door, and we're all sitting there and we're all like, hi, shy, awkward, like there's a man in our house, this like never happens, and this is one of our fathers, but we don't really know these people. And when we turn around, our mother is coming down the stairs wearing lingerie and no underwear. Yep. We would then get kicked out of the house for the next hour, and the door would be locked. And that was it. That was the time we got to spend with our father that we had been looking forward to. And I remember the feeling of being locked out like that and seeing that. It just registered in me as being wrong. I also think I picked up the message from all of those interactions that I witnessed, that men just want sex. Anytime they come around, that's what they're looking for. And while they were there, my mom would let them do whatever they wanted. I remember we would have lunches made in the fridge for the next day, and we'd wake up the next day and they'd be gone. Because I don't know, he came over, they were dipping and doing it for an hour, and you just got so hungry, you just go and eat all the kids' food before you take off to your other girlfriend's house. There was also a time, and later when I was like in my teens, and we had like finally convinced and cajoled and pressured and got the landlord involved to get our mother to not smoke in the apartment. She had this one boyfriend who came over. He walks in the door, steps in the living room, pulls it out and starts smoking right in our apartment. And I remember waiting, my mom just sitting there. She would always change her demeanor around these men. She would get this like coy, childlike, like that kind of helpless demeanor around these men. So I was looking at her like waiting for her to say something. Nothing. So then finally I said, "Oh, sorry, we don't actually smoke inside the apartment. Would you mind stepping outside?" And he goes, "Oh, okay, no problem." And he puts the cigarette out. So I went in the kitchen which was like just around the corner from the living room. My mother followed me in there, and I just tried to act like nothing, but she stood there looking at me, like glaring at me, like, and it was like a child throwing a tantrum kind of face. I feel like my mother was really trapped. She was trapped in either being a 16-year-old mean girl or like an angry 4-year-old. So she was looking at me like, and I remember saying really loudly, like, "What, Mom? Why are you making that face at me? Why do you look so angry?" Like I was trying to say it really loud so that he could hear and people would know exactly what she was doing. It was pretty funny. I definitely learned from that you can have your way of life and your way of being, but if a man steps in and he decides to do something different, you just go along with it and don't say anything. I refuse to go along with that. But unfortunately, the low self-esteem, the low self-worth, these things kind of built themselves into my subconscious mind, into my psyche. Not feeling like I had parents to back me up, that made me feel really insecure, and just disparaged. I became very suspicious of men, which looking back, it was a good thing. It was a really good thing because I was terrified of sex, pregnancy, STDs. It was strange, like the idea that having a child is the worst thing that can happen to you. That kind of branded itself into my brain, which helped me not get involved with men too early at a young age. But it also carries a subconscious message that I was a mistake, I ruined my mother's life, and I was the worst thing that happened. And that's a really hurtful thing to carry. And even when you realize, you become an adult and you have more cognition and you can be aware of these things, they still remain in your heart. And a really easy way of knowing what beliefs we carry inside our hearts is to look at our life and our relationships. That shows how we feel about ourselves. So looking at our body, looking at our health, looking at our relationships, looking at our jobs, that really is the reflection of whatever's going on inside. I have struggled. I've had to spend years in therapy. I've read all the books. I've done all the exercises. I do all the things, and I still struggle. I remember I was always a really lucky kid. I am still like a really lucky person. I won this prize at an art gallery. I was able to go and pick out $400 worth of stuff at this art gallery, and I wanted this beautiful statue. I remember it was pearlescent and kind of opalescent finish, and it was this beautiful woman, and she was reclining on a rock, and she had this long flowing dress on, and the waves were coming up onto her, and she was listening to a seashell, and I wanted it so badly, and I got it. And my mother gave that away to one of her boyfriends, and I remember she cajoled me about it eventually. She was like, "Oh, come on, please, and he's like, "Come on, can I have it? Can I take it?" I don't even know what his excuses were. It was probably to go pawn it, to go buy a ring for his other girlfriend or something like that. It really gave me the message that my wants or needs, the things that were important or special to me, were nothing in the face of these men to my mother. And that kind of betrayal just really broke my heart. And I knew I would never be like that I would never betray my own children or my friends to a man. But what I didn't realize was that I learned to betray myself, right? Because often what was done to us, or my mom betrayed and abandoned me, and that's what we start doing to ourselves. So I would get into a relationship and I would ignore the voices inside of me that noticed red flags. I would make excuses for other people. I would change my plans for a man, or I would give up something I liked that he didn't want me to do, stuff like that. So, and that of course leads to all kinds of things like codependency, people-pleasing behavior. It's like, it follows you. It's a pattern that can really pop up throughout your life in all different ways. The ultimate thing that she tried to get me to do that actually woke me up out of my stupor of just doing what my mom said was when she tried to get me to beg her boyfriend to come back. Hear me out. So she had this boyfriend. He was an alcoholic. He worked at a gas station. And after they'd been together for a few months, she moved him in with me and my brothers, where he proceeded to bully my brothers for eating too much food. She didn't charge him rent, but she would take all of my money that I got from working at jobs, which I'd been doing for a really long time. And it eventually got to the point where one day he was sick of me being in between him and bullying my mom or bullying my brothers. Like, I gave him an attitude. I didn't want him there. I knew he was a bad influence and causing problems, and I was the only one who pretty much stood up to him. So he convinced my mom that I would get kicked out. Now, I was in my, I think I was in my last year of high school. They were sitting together on the couch in the living room, and I was standing there. And I never really broke down to my mother before. I learned to just completely stay strong and not show my emotions at all, and not show how much she was hurting me. But in that moment, I remember I trembled. I kind of faltered, like a cry a little bit, because I said, are you serious, Mom? Like, are you really gonna do this? And he looked at her and he's like, yep. And he said, Gail. And I remember she looked down at her. She had her head down in complete shame, and she nodded that he could kick me out of the house at 16. So that was it for me. It was so difficult from there on out. But what actually ended up happening was I left for a while, and then I eventually came back. And she was still seeing him. And then, of course, they broke up again. And one day I was leaving to go to school, and she said, I need you to come with me on the bus, and we're going to go here first, and then you can go. And I was like, well, no, I can't do that because I'm going to be late. And she's like, no. And she had my little brother with her. And she's like, no, we need to go see him, and this and that. You know, she's trying to make it that we're going to be a family or something like that. And I just said, okay, well, you have to tell me why. Like, why are we going to go? Where are we going? And she said, well, he wants to leave me. And I heard him on the phone talking to his new girlfriend, saying that, oh, I really want to leave her, but I can't because I really like her children. But he still broke up with me anyway, so I need you guys to come, and we're going to go, and we're going to stand underneath his balcony of his apartment and get him to talk to me because he blocked my number. And that was when I just, I was speechless. And I finally told her, no, I'm not doing that, and I'm not going. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that was my day. That was my moment in all of the misery and nonsense she's put me through with men. That was like my moment where I was able to say, no, this ends for me. I'm not involved in this anymore. I only regret not taking my little brother from her too, because she was, taking him to go beg underneath this guy's balcony because he wouldn't let her in and wouldn't answer her phone calls. And so I hope with these stories, they really emphasize the importance of doing the work on ourselves before we have children, to end the generational trauma and shame and self-neglect that leads to these horribly undignified behaviors. And if you've suffered from this, or if you're going through it, just know that you can stop at any time and get help. If you want someone to talk to, I have phone calls available. You can book me below. I've also got a lot of resources in the comments and the description below this video, things that kind of helped me break out of that cycle, and those are free. If you're going through this, it's not your fault what happened to you, but it's now your responsibility as an adult to stop it, to learn to love yourself, and just take it day by day. That's all we can do. That's all I'm doing. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.